in this case. And so we're going to be talking about plant systems today. And again, I don't have that extra title, so the title is Plant Systems. And again, you'll notice I've just put some bullets there with some basic information. And again, not trying to, to overdo the PowerPoint. Again, if you have questions, because maybe I've made it too simple, just ask, all right? And we'll clarify things. So obviously, plants are multicellular systems, just like animals. They have more than one cell. They're not like a single-celled entity. They're green in color due to chlorophyll, all right? And we'll talk more about chlorophyll and photosynthesis tomorrow. So today we're going to talk about the systems in the plants, and tomorrow we will talk about what happens, in those leaves and how that results in energy storage through photosynthesis. So for today, they're green in color due to the chlorophyll, and that chlorophyll is used in photosynthesis. Again, it allows certain colors of light to be absorbed in order to take care of that particular procedure. So you can see there, this is a lot less writing than in the past, but people are still writing because they're plowing ahead. But that's okay. That's all right. So the systems we want to talk about today, there's two main systems. We have a shoot system. Essentially, it's found above the ground. And then we have a root system, and that is found below the ground. Again, there's a diagram, and I apologize, I didn't post it till this morning, which means your labeling of your diagram will be done online. We'll do that afterwards. You'll do a little bit of reading. Or if you want to print it out later on today, you could do that as well. One of the diagrams is similar to this. This one is not out of the textbook, but it's similar to it. And again, you can see the different types of tissues. We'll talk about that in a moment. Above in the shoot system, vascular tissues, we'll talk about that. Tomorrow we'll talk about the leaves and their function in photosynthesis. Today we'll talk a little bit about fruit and seeds. Again, this is just an introduction, so it's really just the basics. Again, epidermis, we'll talk more about that tomorrow. And then the root system under the ground, we've got the primary root and then little lateral roots, and then root hairs, and we'll talk about the function of those root hairs today. Okay, again, short and sweet. It's awesome. Okie dokie. So let's talk a little bit about the root system. Thank you. I think most of this information is pretty straightforward. I have no idea if they do plant systems at all in elementary school. Did you do plants in elementary school? Grow some seeds, maybe? No? Bean seeds in a cup? Bring it home every year, probably around Father's Day. Say, Happy Father's Day, Dad. Here's a bean. It's growing. No? Do they do that anymore? Maybe not. Root system, function, anchors the plant, stores food, absorbs water and minerals. Root hairs are extension of root cells. So each of these little hairs, it's not a cell itself per se, but it is an extension of that cell. So the cell membrane, and I guess there's a cell wall because it's a plant cell, must allow this little protrusion to go into the dirt, into the earth, which then provides a very large surface area, because every one of these will have its own surface in contact with that dirt or with water that's flowing by. And by elongating that surface area of the cell, that allows for maximum water absorption along with any minerals that are coming in. that water absorption will take place via osmosis, right? So there will be pure water or purish water on the outside, all right, of low concentration. There'll be probably some salts and some minerals on the inside. That results in water flowing into the cell. Some roots store food for the plant, so things like carrots and potatoes, those I guess you call them tubers. I'm really not very good at that. Again, things like beets that have those large roots underground that stores the food and we eat them often. So another function of the root system. Okay. The shoot system. Yes, sir.
So, the peas that branch off with the stem, are they also the stem or are they part?
That's a good question. And I don't have an answer for that. I don't know. So, you know, if we were thinking of it in terms of a tree, and I'm just trying to think of it logically, right? If you were to think of it in terms of a tree, is a branch still considered a stem, or is the trunk just the stem? I would say, personally, my view would be a branch is considered still a stem, because it's going to contain, and we're going to talk about this in a moment, what's called vascular tissue. In other words, it's going to contain the tubes that allow the water to flow one way and the food to flow the other way, all right? So I'd say a branch is still a stem, okay? And then the leaf comes off of those stems, all right? Now, looking at that plant right there, that plant right there is a representation of a tomato plant, all right? And tomato plants will grow these kind of secondary stems that exist between the main stem and this thing here, which I would call a single leaf, but I really don't know. And this term down here, it says sucker, and that's the term. In between each leaf on a tomato, another stem will grow out. I remember when I first grew tomatoes, my mother said, you got to pull those suckers off if you want your tomato to grow really tall. If you want your tomato to be bushy, you leave the suckers on, and then these extra branches come out from that location. Now, I would say, and again, I don't know this, but I do garden, so I see a little bit. I would say a tomato leaf, all right, is not one of these little subunits here, but is this entire structure that contains 4, 5, or 6 little pieces on it. I would say that that's one tomato leaf, okay, with that piece that's in the middle, kind of like that middle part of a maple leaf. You know how if you pull off a maple leaf, there's that main piece of the leaf that runs up the middle? I would say that that's the case for a tomato. So that little piece that comes off of the main stem that's holding what we would consider the tomato leaves, I would argue that that's one leaf. And it's like the center part of that maple leaf, right? So I would say that that's not a stem anymore, right? That's part of the leaf, okay? If you let the suckers grow, you would get more stems, like branches on a tree, okay? You see what I mean? So again, not my expertise, but I would argue that a branch on a tree is like an extension of the stem, like a subunit of the stem. Okay? All right. Leaves, main photosynthetic structure. That term simply means that's where photosynthesis takes place. Stem, supports the flowers, leaves, and fruit. Main job here also is transport of water up from the roots and carbohydrates, any food that was created in the leaves, back down to its storage location, which could either be the fruit or the root. Flowers are the sexual organs of a plant, all right? And they contain typically both sex cells, and we're not going to get into detail on flowering plants, but we're talking about things like pollen, all right? Pollen, I believe, if I recall from my elementary or early high school biology, pollen is like the male version of the sex cell, it's like the sperm, and then, yeah, if you've got to go ahead. You can just go the back door there, and then inside the flower is the female part, and when that pollen pollinates the other half of the genetic information, you get seeds, which are typically stored in fruit, and those seeds then can be planted and create a new plant. All right. So flowers. They are part of reproduction, which results in the seeds, but typically in plants, you also get fruit around those seeds, and that's where a lot of our food comes from that fruit that is on those plants. Okay. Plant tissues. So we've talked about the two systems. Let's talk about the different types of tissue that can exist in plants. All right. So again, right, just like in people or in animals, and we've been talking about this, we each have systems, respiratory system, digestive system, et cetera, et cetera. Within those systems, there are tissues, just like we can have epithelial tissue, and we can have connective tissue and muscle tissue. Plants have tissues that have similar functions. So the first type we're going to talk about here is dermal tissue, and again, it's outer tissue. It would be like our epithelial tissue, all right, or epithelial cells that involve skin and all that stuff. So again, dermal tissue, the outermost layer. So epidermis covers the surface of the leaves, stems, and roots, covered in a waxy substance called cuticle, which reduces, and I'm missing a word there. I deleted it away, which reduces water loss. All right. So for those of you who are way ahead of me, go back to that dermal tissue. The cuticle reduces water loss. In other words, it prevents that water from evaporating away. Okay? So that waxy surface prevents that water from leaving, just like our skin generates oils. Those oils protect our skin, prevents the water from evaporating away, same thing. All right? Epidermis, if you're talking about plants, it's the green parts that you see. You know how sometimes in the spring, we can see that now, when a tree maybe produces a nice new branch, and that branch is very green, it's almost like it's got a green, soft type surface, that would be considered the epidermis. All right? And you know how if you're going to have a campfire, breaking off those green branches, forget about it, because they're never going to burn, and that's because their moisture content is very high. All right? Where the periderm forms the bark on the tree, stems and large roots, so that bark is typically a dried out type of tissue, which doesn't have a lot of moisture in it. It still serves a purpose as being a thick protective cover, but it tends to cover the older portions of the plants. All right? So it tends to look less green and brown and gray and all those different colors that bark can be. Okay? All right? So, vascular tissue, a little slide to describe what vascular tissue is, and then probably the wordiest slide of all of the PowerPoint is coming next. You saw when I kind of clicked ahead. And I really kind of battled with how to reduce the words on this slide. Because, hey, if I'm writing notes, I would hate to be writing all this stuff because I'm not that type of a person. Writing it out is strenuous for me. But I couldn't get it any smaller than that, so I apologize. The information found in there was all kind of needed. So vascular tissue is like our circulatory system, all right? If we were to compare it to something that we've already talked about, it's like the veins and kind of the arteries, kind of like it. Plants don't have blood, but they do move water up from the roots. They move carbohydrates, highly concentrated kind of sugars out from the leaves, and they have to be moved to various places in the plants. Again, a plant doesn't have a heart, all right? So it's all done by what we've learned, osmosis and diffusion, things like that, move those things around. But we still need various types of tubes in order to make that transportation take place. So the two types of tubes, and I could have made this 2 slides, but I decided to keep it as one. The 2 types of tubes are called xylem and phloem. In grade 11, you will be looking at slides of stems that have been cut really thin, and you'll be able to see the different types of these minerals, xylem and phloem. And if you've, well, and I'm sure we've all seen a tree that's been cut, the various rings on those trees, and those tree rings contain those little tubes. They're tiny. We can't see them with our eyes. If we had a microscope and we could look at that surface, we would see the little tubes, and the xylem and the phloem would be in those rings of those trees. All right? Trees tend to lay down a new layer of xylem and phloem every year, all right? They lay down that new layer as the tree grows in width. And then plants that aren't like trees, that are more like annuals, that die in, say, our cold climate, and that you've got to replant, they don't get those layers, so they have just that vascular tissue. If you bite into a piece of celery, you can see that you've all experienced that stringy part, right, that gets stuck in your teeth. That, I don't know whether it's the xylem or the phloem, but those are those tubes that move that water up and down, up to the leaves, down towards wherever it's storing the sugar. And in this case, it stores it actually in the stem, right? When we eat celery, we're eating the stem, and that's where that food part of it is. Yep.
Maybe a bit complex for you, but,
It's okay. It's all right. I can handle it.
will on the outside or the inside?
Yeah, that's a good question. As I was speaking it, I was trying to think of whether it does or doesn't, and I don't know. I don't know. It is too complex. I don't know. I want to say that it happens from the outside because, and I'm going to just use some logic, okay? Because that's the only information I have. Because in the spring, if you want to get sap to make maple syrup, you don't have to drill all the way into the center of the tree to find where that water is flowing up to the leaves. You just have to get into the outer layers of the tree, right? You only have to tap the tree only a few centimeters or maybe an inch in to access that live flowing tissue. So I would say it adds a layer to the outside. But again, that's just a guess based on the fact that when you tap a maple tree, you only have to drill in a little bit. You don't have to drill right into the center of the tree to get where that liquid is flowing. Does that make sense? So I don't know, but that would be my guess based on that kind of evidence, right? I guess we could Google search it if we really wanted to. Do trees rings form from the outside or from the inside? That would be awesome. But again, my guess is based on, again, knowing how trees are tapped. So what is xylem? Elongated cells that lie end to end to form a tube that carry water and minerals from the root up through the stem into the leaves and the flowers. There was no way for me to take words out and make that any less wordy, but it just is what it is.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Can I talk to Ashley for a second?
You can. If you could avoid bumping my cart, it would be appreciated. Awesome. Mature xylem cells are not living. The cytoplasm dries up, provides a hollow tube or cylinder for the movement of water. So the xylem is dead tissue. It's just these tubes. And you know what? Maybe if the xylem is dead, right? If the xylem is dead, and we're drilling into that xylem on the outside of the tree, maybe that isn't the new ring. Because maybe the water's flowing up the dead xylem tubes. And maybe the phloem is in the middle of the tree that moves it back down. You know what I mean? So this logic here doesn't necessarily answer our question. Because if that outer ring, let's say the xylem where that, because when we collect sap, we're collecting it as it comes up from the roots in the spring, right? And if that's the case, then we're drilling into some dead tissue maybe. So maybe that doesn't help us. Maybe that logic fails when we apply it to the fact that the xylem is dead. It's just a tube that has been formed, okay? Phloem tissue is specialized to transport sugars that is made by photosynthesis from the leaves into the growing tips and the roots of the stem, so out to where it needs it. Mature phloem cells are living and functioning, so therefore they have cell walls, and osmosis and diffusion play a big part there. All right. With the xylem, I do know that it's not necessarily osmosis that brings the water up. It's more like a straw. When you suck up on a straw, you have nothing living in the straw. You just draw the water up the straw. Now you might be asking, what's drawing the water up the xylem tube to get to the top? It tends to be the leaves, all right? And in the leaves, at the surface of the leaves, water can evaporate and get out from the leaves. And when the water molecules evaporate and leave, just like you sucking on a straw, the next bit of water gets sucked up in the place of the leaving water. So the evaporating water out of the leaves causes negative pressure, like when you suck up on a straw, and that draws that water up those xylem tubes like sucking up a straw, all right? So it's the leaves that are causing that, that evaporation. They call it transpiration for plants, and that draws it up. Okay, so the xylem moves the water up, and the phloem moves the sugars and other things up or down, depending on where the storage goes. It's either got to go to the fruits to be stored, or maybe down to the root to be stored as well, depending on the type of plant. Okay. Ground tissue. So ground tissue is the stuff that's in between the epidermis and the vascular tissue. And it's the filler in between. And in a tree ring, the vast majority of that thickness of that ring would be ground tissue. All right, the vast majority of that ring's diameter. In this picture, it almost implies that the vascular tissue is right up the middle, right? And with a tree, what happens? Does new vascular tissue grow in the spring? Maybe it does, and that then pushes the ring out, right? We're still kind of on that ring question. That's because I didn't answer it. So I'm trying to come up with an answer. Yep.
My thought on that is that, the inside of the tree is a small part, so if it was growing outward, most likely things happen would be that it would like stretch and break, like if you were like.
So the outer part wouldn't be able to grow, it would break because it's dead and brittle. Yeah. So growing out and then in. That makes good sense too. That makes good logical sense. But maybe there's enough moisture. Again, I don't know. Did you check it online? Did you see what it said, or?
Yes, like, something grew from the inside, then it contradicted itself by saying, another part grew from the outside, and it contradicted itself by saying it grew from the inside.
Could it be both? Is it 2 rings a year? One from the center, one from the outside? You'd think we would know this stuff. This is sad. Haven't we been taught you just count the rings and it's the number of years? Isn't that true? I'm confused. Or you just go back to frogs. Frogs were so much more easier to understand than trees. Okay. Filler found between the vascular tissue and the dermal tissues. Leaves carry out the function in leaves carry out photosynthesis using the chlorophyll. So there's ground tissue there, I guess. In roots, storage of sugars as complex carbohydrates. And again, in stems, provide storage and support. So it looks like here, ground tissue is found in leaves, in roots, and in stems. And they don't have, by the looks of it, any particular function other than storage. Storage of carbohydrates, et cetera, water. All right? So ground tissue, by the looks of it, storage and support. Okay. Oh, wait a minute, 1 second. What is needed for photosynthesis? Just wait a minute. Hold on. I forgot that I added 2 notes together. If you've already started writing, you've wrote all the way to the bottom, haven't you? You've made it all the way to the end. I was going to maybe save this for tomorrow. Yeah, let me just take a look here what we're dealing with here. Yeah, I was going to do that tomorrow. Yes. So let's do photosynthesis, and I've got another one for tomorrow. So we're going to stop right there. Those of you who have gone ahead, it's okay because we'll be doing that tomorrow. So if you've already written ahead, you're okay. So let's escape out of here. Okay. And I'm going to discard the writing, and I'm going to stop the recording.